Good morning. Welcome to the Region 6 MTSS Summer Conference. Thank you for joining us for Go Team Go, Building Supports for MTSS Implementation. This is going to be presented by Tara Broussard, who is the RTI Specialist for Humble ISD. My name is Amy Cunningham, and I'm the Reading Language Arts Specialist for Region 6. I will serve as your moderator for today's presentation. I want to invite you to use a few interactive features provided within this platform. You can post questions during the presentation, and I will ask Tara to respond at the end of the presentation. In addition to asking questions, you can vote questions to the top of the list by clicking the up arrow to the right of the question. Also, we have social media sharing provided within this platform. Please use hashtag ESD6 MTSS21 and follow the conference conversation. If you need help or technical assistance, you can visit the help desk indicated by the question mark in the side navigation menu. Okay, so without any further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Tara Broussard.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. As Amy said, my name is Tara Broussard, and I have just completed my 21st year in education, the last 6 being an RTI specialist or interventionist. And so I hope that I am able to give you insight on MTSS from my background. Feel free to ask questions. Like Amy said, I will be answering those at the end, and you will also be getting some resources as well and handouts. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this started. There we are. Okay, awesome. And let's put this in presentation mode. I need all these to go away. All right, so you are here for Go Team Go, building support for MTSS. And here we go. Okay, so our agenda today, we have our purpose of MTSS, our roles and responsibilities, best practices, and building support for implementation. So MTSS encompasses supports for the whole child. It takes into account their academic behaviors, social, emotional behaviors, all the things that encompass that whole child. MTSS is a term that is being used more and more nationwide. It encompasses RTI and positive behavior intervention and support, which is sometimes called PBIS. These are examples under the MTSS umbrella. So oftentimes we are trying to decide if behavior is impacting academics for those kiddos, or if it's the academics that are impacting the behavior. And when you use a multi-tiered system like MTSS, it will really help you ensure that all the needs of that student is being met, and to see the growth in both academics and behavior that we are hoping to find. So response to intervention, or as some call it RTI, is the practice of providing high quality instruction and interventions that match the student needs. That's a key that we all need to make sure that we are doing, is matching the student needs, and it is on a prescribed skill. We're going to do progress monitoring frequently to make decisions about changes that we might need to be making in our instructions or goals, and we're going to apply child response data to important educational decisions. So here is our MTSS graphic. And as you can see, our multi-tiered system includes and encompasses RTI. It includes their emotional needs, their social needs, as well as PBIS. Okay, so a multi-tiered system of support is a framework implemented and targeted support. It is intended for early intervention, so to help those students catch up with their peers. It focuses on the whole child, academics, social, emotional, behavioral, and it is a collaborative effort. Administrators have so much on their plate, so having an MTSS team is super important so that we are getting all aspects of the child and more input on how we can help the child. So MTSS is not a specific curriculum. It is not an intended place for all struggling learners. It identifies for academic supports only, and it is not possible to implement alone. Some of the key elements for MTSS are universal screenings for all. This could be delegated by your district. I know on our campus, we have used, for universal screenings, we have used iStation and Renaissance for academic universal screenings. We've used DESA from the counselor for our behavioral and emotional needs for our students. And those are conducted throughout the year to progress monitor growth. It also increased level of targeted support for those who are struggling. So we don't necessarily want to put everybody into RTI. We want to make sure that our tier 1 in-class support is the strongest. We know that kids come to school with summer gaps, COVID gaps. And so when we implement a engaging, student-led, student-directed activities within the classroom, that's where we're going to see the most bang for our buck. So we want to make sure that that tier 1 instruction within the classroom is strong before we are placing them into RTI. So it also includes integrated plans that address students' academic, behavioral, social, and emotional needs. It is a school-wide approach. It includes teachers, counselors, psychologists, if you have them on your campus, and other specialists working as a team so that we can assess and address all the students' needs to best help that whole child. It also includes professional development. With your staff and on your campus, we want to meet with, whether it's through faculty meetings, whether it's through monthly meetings that you have on your campus. It is super important to have that professional development, to talk about those kids, to talk about improvements, interventions, progress monitoring, so that it is not just a one-time thing that you might do at the beginning and end of the year. Family involvement is super important. We want to really build that triangle of communication between the school, the parent, and the child, so that that child knows that we are all working for them and not against them, to give them the supports that they need in order to be successful in school. Frequent monitoring of students' progress is helpful when you are trying to decide if you need to make changes or move them up or down a tier. Are the supports working? I do, as an interventionist, I do weekly progress monitoring for tier 2 kids. And then when they are in tier 3, we have 2 weekly monitorings from myself and the teacher, just to stay on top of it, to make sure that the supports we have in place are effective. We want to use research-based and prescribed skill sets for those students. Also, the use of evidence-based strategies at every tier of support. So pulling things off of Pinterest or Teachers Pay Teachers may not always be your best strategy. You really want to look into research and evidence-based practices to help those students. Okay, response to intervention. It is a framework to implement effective practices. It matches campus and district resources to meet students' needs that also align with your state requirements. It is a collaborative effort. I cannot emphasize that enough. not one person is going to get a whole picture of this child. So this MTSS team is going to be crucial in meeting the needs of the student and seeing the success that you want. So response to intervention is not an instructional program. One size does not fit all. You're really going to have to dig into the data and see where those gaps are for that student and meet them where they are. RTI is not intended as a placement for all struggling learners. Like I said, you want to give them that time in tier 1 to see if that can close the gaps. I usually do not start interventions. My rollover kids, I start, September, after they've gotten a good foundation and routine and learning their class and learning their teachers. Our new kiddos, we don't even start to look at until all of our literacy assessments are complete. And then we go back and we look at that universal data and kind of use all components, teacher notes, universal data, literacy assessments, and we look at that whole child before we even begin interventions. And again, it is not possible to implement alone. You need teachers, counselors, specialists, all on board to help these students learn. And the why is graduation. We want to start early. We want to close as many gaps as possible. We want to get them back into the classroom with their peers. That is our why. That is our main goal in MTSS. Okay, so your campus role and responsibility versus your MTSS role and responsibilities. So who is on your MTSS support team? You may not have all of these specialists available on your campus at all times. However, the more input that you have on a team is going to be more impactful for finding the gaps and discussing what the student needs and prescribing that educational intervention that will help them grow as a learner. So the MTSS student support team includes, but is not limited to, representation from your general education teachers, special education teachers, interventionists, specialists, that could be reading, math, behavior. You have your administrators, your school counselors, your diagnosticians or LSSPs, and social workers if you have them available on your campus. The campus MTSS support team meets regularly. And when I say regularly, on my campus, we met monthly to discuss data and about every 6 to 9 weeks to reevaluate student supports and their growth, to decide if we needed to make changes or move them to a different tier or add extra supports. So they're going to meet to analyze the universal screening data in order to interpret the trends and identify any struggling learners who fall below the predetermined cut score. You're going to review the data to determine whether there are deficits in Tier 1 curriculum or delivery of instruction that may be contributing to the student's inability to meet those standards. So again, we really want to look at Tier 1 instruction before we are putting them into a support system. So we also want to provide consultation to teachers and other staff on improving that Tier 1 whole class instruction. That can come from talks with the interventionist. It can come from administrators, coaches, specialists, whoever can be that supportive role model. We want to look at relationships as well with that classroom teacher. Who will she respond to openly? So when you're trying to put those teams together for that Tier 1 support, we want to go in as a collective team, helping, not hurting. So problem solve, you also want to problem solve small group and individual interventions aimed at increasing the learning rate of learners. So we want to identify their strengths, their interests, their talents, because we want to keep it engaging. We want to start with those strengths that they have and build from there to close the gaps. We want to has been collected. So it's from there that baseline data is where you will make those goals, and you want to make those goals with the students so that they are aware of where they are and where they're going. And I have my kids track with that weekly progress monitoring that we do. We track it. We see, okay, are we growing towards our goal? We want to set projected outcomes and methods for measuring progress. So on our campus, we baseline in DIBELS, the 8th edition, and then we use easy CVM reading probes for our reading progress monitoring weekly. And we have a campus-based curriculum for math progress monitoring. We want to make data-driven decisions for students who are experiencing difficulties in academic and behavioral domains, again, to support that whole child. We want to ensure that selected interventions are implemented with fidelity. So if you have a schedule, or whatever schedule your campus comes up with for those supports, we want to make sure that we are meeting that student, whether it's for RTI, whether it's for behavioral supports. We want to make sure that we are keeping that schedule with them. That sends a message to the student that we are here for them. We think that they are important and we want to be there to help them grow. So we want to also ensure that the selected interventions are implemented, with fidelity, just read that. And we want to develop a plan to communicate the plans to the students and the parents. So again, that is with that goal setting, that is with that parent phone call or that parent face-to-face conference to let the parents and the student know that, okay, these are your strengths. These are your, we don't call them weaknesses, we call them opportunities. So here are your strengths, here are your opportunities, and this is our roadmap to help you get there. Okay, so here is a little quiz. Please feel free to hop into the chat and see if you can answer who is the person on the MTSS support team that would fulfill these roles and responsibilities. So the role would be to, is the core instruction expert. They would provide effective Tier 1 instruction to students, review data and align resources, provide expertise in instructional content and delivery, and participate in ongoing PD. Who do you think that would be on your campus? You can type it in the chat. That person would be your general education teachers. We really want, again, that Tier 1 instruction has to be strong in order to close those gaps and see if extra supports are really needed. Okay, so who would be the expert instruction for special education students? Who would provide effective instruction to students, provide expertise in instructional content and delivery, assess students, and participate in ongoing PD? Are you noticing a trend? Participate in ongoing PD? Because it is a year-long process, and you want to meet with that team to discuss that child. Okay, that would be your special education teachers. Who is the person on your campus that is an expert instruction for dyslexic students? Provide an effective instruction to those students, and provide expertise on instructional content and delivery for students with dyslexia, assess students, and participate in ongoing PD. That would be your dyslexia specialists or your dyslexia teachers on campus. Okay. Who would provide content coaching support instruction? They support administrators with data digging. However, that has become a love of mine as well. Coordinate and provide ongoing PD to support the content of instruction and behavior support. Provide expertise in components of literacy, numeracy, or behavior. Provide coaching supports to teachers to increase student success, and model instructional strategy. This could mean coming into the classroom and modeling. It could be modeling during your campus meetings. Those would be your specialists, whether it be reading, math, behavioral, etc. Any of those special supports on your campus. Okay, who on your campus provides interventions? Supports administrators with data analysis, develop and monitor individual students' academic or behavioral intervention plans, provides evidence-based, I'm going to say that again, evidence-based interventions to identify Tier 2 and Tier 3 students, provides expertise in targeted interventions in literacy, numeracy, or behavior. Targeted interventions is key because you want to make sure that you are honing into what that skill deficit is to help build academically, to help them catch up with their peers sooner, and provide expertise in instructional delivery as related to intervention. It's my new love. Interventionists get to do all that fun stuff. And it really has become my passion, is the data digging, the finding out really what those students need, and finding that those research-based, evidence-based skills to deliver. Okay, who is the MTSS leader and data meeting facilitator? So they want to, who is the person to ensure buy-in and support of all school personnel? If you don't have that buy-in, the system is not going to work. You have to sell it. It is what every student needs. They need, those struggling students need this tiered support system, and you have to deliver it to where you get that buy-in and support from everybody on your campus, from office to teachers to administrators. Who develops a system for monitoring and management of the process? Who facilitates access to the data and collection? Who establishes the core and supplemental members of the school's MTSS or RTI leadership team? Who involves key stakeholders as needed on the function of the meeting? Who establishes regular chats or meetings to analyze the data, problem solve, and plan for that multi-tiered approach for those students who are needing more, whether it's prevention, instruction, or intervention based on the needs of the school or the student. And who manages available resources, internal or external, to facilitate those meetings. That would be your campus administrators. Okay. And who is the data management, who is in charge of data management and analysis, schedules data collection and management activities, oversees teacher managing and analyzing data, Lead data analysis oversees collection of screening, diagnostic, progress monitoring, and outcome data, and who oversees data management and analysis. This could look different on your campus, because for this one, we have different personnel on our campus that does different parts of this. But for your MTSS team, that would be your campus designee. So like I said, the scheduling the data collection, that could be the math or reading specialists. We have calendars and when we're going to do those universal screeners and literacy assessments. Oversees teacher managing and analyzing data. Again, that is a team between myself and our math and reading specialists. Before we hold our meetings, we have kind of a cover sheet of data that we want the teachers to go do a little data digging and fill out this cover sheets and what they're expected to have for the meeting, so that once we get to the meeting time, they're ready to go. Okay, who is in charge of the counseling and behavior support? Supports administrators with data analysis, supports administrators in monitoring effective PBIS instruction, infusion of social emotional learning into the classroom curriculum, and provides evidence-based, universal, targeted, and intensive education and or behavioral lessons, individual group counseling, and or skill building groups. That would be your school counselor. Okay. Who is the expert in assessments? Supports administrators with data analysis, provides expert in instructional content, provides additional support with instructional strategies, and also assesses students when needed. I want to say that, when needed. So that's going to be your diagnosticians or your LSSPs. Okay, and who on your campus is expert in supporting the mental and behavioral wellness, promotes a school climate and culture for conditional to student learning and teaching excellence, maximizes access to school-based community and community-based resources, who promotes mental and behavioral wellness on your campus for all students, and who is in charge of professional development related to the identification of mental health concerns and the referral process. Those would be your social workers if you have them on campus. Okay, so as you can see, there are so many roles for MTSS, for that team to be a cohesive, well-rounded team to meet the needs of the whole child and to give them the supports that are going to help them achieve their goals and help them be, I call it, promoted back into the classroom as soon as possible. So MTSS best practices encompass several things. We want to make sure that we're doing that universal screening. We want to make sure that we are using researched and evidence-based practices. We want to make sure that we are doing that progress monitoring. Like I said, I do it weekly, and then over a few weeks, if I see that what I'm doing isn't working or what teachers are implementing isn't working, we change it. We meet again, we have a quick meeting and say, hey, here is the data. This is what we're seeing in progress monitoring. We might do an interim DRA to get just different aspects and different data points. And if it's not working, we need to change it, but you're not going to be able to see that as often if you're not doing that weekly progress monitoring. You want to do data-based decision making. So again, that is where this progress monitoring piece comes in from me, from the teachers, supports that you may be using weekly that is collecting data for you. We want to make sure that we have fidelity of implementation. It has to happen. We can't put it off. If we put it off, we're sending the wrong message to that child that they don't matter. We have to do it with fidelity to show them that we're all in on helping them to reach their goals and be successful. So tier 1 support, can't say it enough. It needs to be strong, student-centered, engaging, and also aligned to your state standards. We have to have that in place because that is where the students will get more bang for your buck in the classroom. So tiers 2 and 3 are supplemental to tier 1. So if a student moves to RTI tier 2 or tier 3, that does not mean that the classroom teacher is no longer implementing those support structures that the child needs. It just means that the RTI interventionist or the classroom teacher work together to make sure that the student is getting those supplemental supports that they need, and they're working together to form a plan for that student's growth. So the multi-tiered, how to streamline those multi-tiered support procedures. Again, universal screening, evidence-based interventions done with fidelity, that progress monitoring and database, however you say it, decision making. You want to establish the guidelines for decision making, whether you use matrices, enter and exit criteria, because you don't want them in the support system as lifers. You want to get them back into the classroom and with their peers as soon as possible. Other processes your campus may have to establish these decision-making guidelines, and you want to use the expertise of all the educators on the team involved. And also getting that information from parents is crucial. Are they seeing changes at home where you may need to change up their supports? Keeping that line of communication open with parents is super, super important. Okay, so how are we going to implement and build support for these kiddos? Okay, so I want you to take a minute and think about where are you or where is your campus on building your support? Are you at level 1 and just informing? Is the classroom teacher or possibly a coach or RTI specialist or counselor the only one doing the talking? Is it a one-way conversation? This is what I saw in the data and it is stopped. Are you at a level 2 in networking within your campus? Are you exchanging two-way communication? Maybe it's the teacher and the math or reading specialist. Is it the interventionist and the teacher? Is it the counselor and the diagnostician? You know, is it two people communicating on the data that they are receiving from the students? Level 3 is a collaborative, more of a collaborative team building, engaging, working together on an issue over time. And level 4 is transforming. You are committing approaching issues through engagement and consensus building. So if you are at a 1 or a 2 and it's new, I understand, I've been there on my campus. We really want to strive to be a 3 or a 4. And when you are holding those MTSS meetings, and having that collaborative support team ongoing with those meetings, whether they are monthly, every 6 to 9 weeks. If you are having those ongoing conversations as a team, that's where you want to be. So we really want you to strive to be a level 3, moving to a level 4. So where are you in building your support? Think about where you just assessed your campus. Okay. So are all of your stakeholders data literate? Where do they fall? That means, do they understand the vocabulary? Do they understand the differences between formal and informal data? Okay. What is the purpose of the specific data? Okay. Why do you need to collect this data? Okay. That is the when and the why. When do you want to collect the data? Why do you want to collect this data? You want to make sure that it is matching student needs. Why should decisions be data-driven? How can data be used to improve services, systems, and outcomes? Again, we want our interventions to match the deficits needing to be closed. And how do you use your data meetings? Okay, your data meetings should be used to get to the heart of the problem, come up with solutions, find research and evidence-based strategies that can help the student progress. Okay, so data meetings. There was a question on the board. Will there be any handouts for this session? And can we get a copy of the PowerPoint? I know that we will be getting this data meetings portion and some other FAQs and some handouts for you at the end. And I will have to ask about the PowerPoint copy for you guys. But okay, for data meetings. So before the meeting, you have to do some work. When you come into the meeting, you want to be focused, you want to be concise, because chances are you will be talking about more than one student per classroom. And so if you do the work before, doing a little bit of that digging, you will be able to run the meeting more smoothly. So you want to make sure to share the data you're going to discuss. And our campus has a folder, like I said, with a cover sheet, and the teacher collects the data that we ask for. We collect the same data and we have it in a folder for each student that we're going to discuss, ready to go. You're going to use the same format for every meeting. You're going to clearly define meeting norms. And when you're ready to get started, there will be a facilitator and they're going to remind the group of the norms and asks for a volunteer timekeeper. Because like I said previously, there's going to be more than one student, and we want to give all students that we're going to be talking about the time that they need to come up with those supports and decisions. If we need more time on a student, what we've done is come back to that student at the end, or we have scheduled kind of informal meetings to discuss that child further with the classroom teachers. You also want the educator providing the data sheet to give a brief statement of the data, but you also want them to avoid any conclusions about the data, because that's what you're in the meeting for, is you are going to be, of course, her conclusions are important, and we do want to hear them. However, this is a database meeting, and so we want to hear from all educators and all personnel involved. So when you are describing the data, the facilitator is going to ask, what do you see? What are their strengths? What are their opportunities? So the group will gather as much information as possible, and then group members will describe what they see in the data. Again, avoiding those judgments and interpretations. If the judgments and interpretations arise, which they will, the facilitator should ask the person to describe the evidence on which it's based. Just like when we have students answering questions for us in reading, we want evidence from the book that they're reading. What makes them think that? We want to ask the same thing of our teachers who are coming up with those conclusions. And we want to list the group's observations on chart paper as we go. Okay, so now it's time. We have all the data that we've seen listed on chart paper. So now it's time to go and interpret that data to try to find the best supports for that student. So the facilitator is going to ask, what does this data suggest? What assumptions can we make? Are the about these students, and they're learning based on the evidence, based on the data. So the group should try to find as many different interpretations as possible. It's not a one-way street. It's not a one-size-fits-all. What is good for one student may not be what works for another. So we need to think broadly and creatively about the data. We want to listen to others' interpretations, and if we're not understanding where their thinking is coming from, we need to be comfortable enough on that team to ask questions to, could you explain that? Can you say that differently? We want to be able to to understand each other's interpretation. And we are also that chart paper. We're going to use that chart paper to record findings. All right, so the next step is to select student solutions. So the facilitator, again, is going to ask, what patterns do we see? What will help us leverage the most progress for learning? And the group will select a pathway that will yield the most leverage and progress for students. So do we need more intervention? Do we need to possibly go into testing? Are we seeing really big red flags? Do we need to spend a little bit more time in tier 1? Have we seen some growth in that tier 1 instruction and it seems to be working? That's a decision that can be made right there. If they're making that progress in tier 1, it may not be time to move them to an alternate support system. Okay, the team can consider the team then considers what about this decision will move the students forward in their learning, and select the educator who will aid in delivering the instruction or put forth a testing request. So on our campus, we try to make it known that when a student is struggling, especially academically, and enters the RTI system or RTI program, if we are seeing huge red flags and the student is, we've pulled out all the stops, we've used that evidence and research-based instruction, and they are just not progressing, you do not have to go through all the tiers before you go to testing. However, it is a collaborative decision that needs to be made with all members of the team involved to come to consensus that is going to be the best thing to do for that kiddo, because we don't want to put them in testing or special ed or dyslexia if it's not in the best interest of the child's learning and academic growth. So, and then the team develops a consensus and moves forward with their decision. Okay. So you will have debriefing processes. So like I said, this is ongoing. So you as a team will determine how often you are meeting, whether it's monthly, every 6 to 9 weeks, to debrief. So the facilitator will ask, how well did this process work? Based on data, based on that weekly progress monitoring based on those universal screeners. What about the process helped you to see and learn interesting or surprising things? Okay, this is where if you've really focused on the strengths of the student and built from there, that is going to help you see some emotional and behavioral improvements as well. And so really getting to know the child, taking that time to show them that you are 100% invested is going to give you more insight to the child, more insight on what's working, what might need to be changed, and just building that relationship with them is key. So how can this team pursue these questions further? So ask, is it working? Is it not working? The things that you are implementing in the classroom with the interventionist or dyslexia specialist, just making sure you come back and revisit those things. So what questions about teaching and assessment arise from looking at the data? So as you're looking at the data, this is where, again, you decide, do you need to make changes? Do you need to add? Are they growing? Can you scaffold a little bit and give them less supports? Do we need to look at further assessments? Do we need to find an alternate source of assessments for that student? So are there things you would like to try in the classroom as a result of looking at this data? Again, that scaffolding piece. Do we need to give more supports, less supports? And what are the vertical implications? So where are they moving on vertical alignment? Are they closing that gap? Are they just stalled out and not making any progress? Are they making progress, but not at the same speed as their peers? So we want to take a look at all this data in the meetings, and I know it's a lot, but it's baby steps. If you are just starting out, start small and build from there. I promise it gets easier as you practice more. Okay, so are there any questions about today's presentation? I will say I didn't spend a lot of time on the PBIS part, but I have seen a campus that works with a PBIS system, and I'm going to stop sharing for this one. And a campus that does not work with a PBIS system, and the difference is exponential. You really taking the time to get to know that student and to see what drives them. You know, what are they interested in? Are they interested in more time with you, the teacher, or a lunch date, or just in small group? Are they motivated by classroom incentives or coupons? Or maybe they're motivated by more free time for themselves or computer time. That PBIS component on a campus is so impactful for behavior and fulfilling the students' emotional and social needs as well. So if there are any other questions or about the presentation or MTSS, I'll be happy to answer them.
Tara, I just want to thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and expertise. It was very informative. I don't see any questions in the chat. If anyone wants to pop one in there, we do still have a few minutes. While maybe you're dropping that in there, before we close, I want to bring your attention to a couple of things. There is a session feedback link with a survey, and we would really appreciate your help completing this so that we can continue growing in our practice. Also, this session is being recorded and it will be added to the session link when it's available. And I know Tara was talking about sharing her handout, her presentation. She's going to work on getting that uploaded as well. All right, well, if there are not any other questions, is there anything else you want to close with, Tara?
Just thank you very much for listening. And I hope that you do try to implement even the smallest part of the MTSS team, because it can really move mountains when you are discussing child growth and development.
Very true. Well, thank you everyone for joining us.